Hi friends, welcome to Tackleknowledgechannel. So today I am going to start Biochemistry White and White textbook about the life. Okay, let's begin with this chapter. So in this chapter we will be seeing about the prokaryotes, okay, form and function, prokaryotic classification, eukaryotes, cell architecture, phylogeny and differentiation, biochemistry a prolong, genetics a review, origin of life, biochemical literature. So all six topics we will be seeing it. Okay, so today we will be seeing about the prokaryotes. Okay, it is usually easy to decide whether or not something is alive. So it is easy to decide for us that something is alive. Okay, this is because living things share many common attributes such as the capacity to extract energy from nutrients to drive their various functions, the power to actively respond to change in their environment. So the living things which are sharing the common attributes, they show a capacity to extract energy from different nutrient sources. Okay, its functions and the power to actively, they are showing the response to the response and changes to their environmental conditions, and the ability to grow, to differentiate, and perhaps most telling of all, to reproduce. So there, as we know that the ability of growing, to differentiate, and telling of all, to reproduce. So this is in the case of living things. Okay, so the living things can grow, they can differentiate, okay, and they can reproduce. Of course a given organisms may not have all of these traits. So of course any organism does not contain these traits. Okay, for example mules, which are obviously alive. So as we know that mules are obviously alive, rarely reproduce. So they are alive and they are reproducing rarely. Okay, conversely inanimate matter may exhibit some lifelike properties. So inanimate matter may exhibit lifelike properties. Okay, for instance crystals may grow larger when immersed in a supersaturated solution of the crystalline material. So for the crystal which is growing larger, they can be immersed in supersaturated solution of crystalline material. Okay, therefore life is, as are many other complex phenomena, is perhaps impossible to define in a precision fashion. So the life is very much a complex phenomena. Okay, so impossible to define the precise fashion of the life. Okay, norman horowitz Norman Horowitz, however, proposed a useful set of criteria for living systems. Life possesses the properties of replication, catalysis, and mutability. So, the scientist Norman Horowitz, he proposed that living system has a criteria called life possessing the properties of replication, catalysis, and mutability. Okay, much of this text is concerned with the manner in which or living organisms exhibit these properties. So the textbook is concerning that the living organisms exhibit their properties. Okay, biochemical is the study of a biochemistry is the study of life on the molecular level. So as we know that biochemistry is a study of life at a molecular level. Okay, the significance of such studies is greatly enhanced if they are related to the biology of corresponding organisms, or even communities of such corresponding organisms, or even communities of such organisms. So this introductory chapter therefore begins with a synopsis of biological realms. So this introductory chapter therefore begins with the synopsis of a biological realm. This is followed by an outline of biochemistry, a review of genetics, a discussion of the origin of life, and finally an introduction of the biochemical literature. So the whole chapter is begins with the synopsis of a biological realm, okay, which is following the outline of the biochemistry, and it is also reviewing the genetics and discussing about the origin of life, and finally an introduction to the biochemical literature. This is about this chapter, okay. So all these outlines of biochemistry, review of genetics, discussion of origin of life, and finally an introduction to the biochemical literature, all this we are going to see in this chapter, okay. So next we will be seeing about the prokaryotes. It has long been recognized that life is based on morphological units known as cells. So as we know that the long being recognized by the life on morphological units known as cells, okay. The formation of this concept is generally attributed to an 1838 paper by Matthias Scladen and Theodore Schwann, but its origin may be traced to 17th century observations of early microscopists such as Robert Hooke. So here in 1838 a paper was attributed by Matthias Scladen and Theodore Schwann, okay, but its origin was traced by 17th century. In the 17th century its origin was traced by a scientist Robert Hooke, okay. He observed in the early microscopists as the cells has been firstly given an origin to the cells was Robert Hooke, okay. There are two major classifications of cells: the eukaryotes, Greek eu means good or true means karyon, kernel or nut. So the two major classification of cells are eukaryotes and prokaryotes, okay. So eukaryotes means eu means good, true means karyon, okay, kernel or nut, which have a membrane enclosed nucleus encapsulated their DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and the prokaryotes, pro means before, which lacks this organelles. So the eukaryotes which is having a membrane enclosed nucleus encapsulated their DNA. DNA full form is deoxyribonucleic acid, and the prokaryotes, pro before, which lacks this organelle. Prokaryotes, which comprises the various type of bacteria, have relatively simple structure and are invariably unicellular, although they may form filaments or colonies of independent cells. So the prokaryotes is comprising various types of bacteria, okay, relatively simple structures and invariably unicellular, okay. So they are forming like a filaments or colonies of independent cells, okay. So they are estimated to represent about half of Earth's biomass. So the prokaryotes are estimated by half of Earth biomass, okay. Eukaryotes, which may be multicellular as well as unicellular. So eukaryotes are multicellular as well as unicellular, are vastly more complex than prokaryotes. So eukaryotes are more complex than prokaryotes. Viruses, which are much simpler entities than cells, are not classified as living because they lack the metabolic apparatus to reproduce outside their host cells. So the viruses, which are simpler entities than cells, are not classified as a living, okay, because they lack the metabolic apparatus to reproduce outside their host cell, okay. They are essentially large molecular aggregates. So eukaryotes are essentially large molecular aggregates. This section is discussion of prokaryotes. Eukaryotes are considered in the following sections. So this section is discussing about the prokaryotes and eukaryotes in a considered manner, okay. Now let's see about the form and function of a prokaryotes, okay. Prokaryotes are the most numerous and widespread organisms on Earth. So as we know that prokaryotes are most numerous and widespread organisms on Earth, okay. This is because their varied and often highly adaptable metabolism suit them to an enormous variety of habitats. So the prokaryotes are varied and often highly adaptable metabolism which suits them to enormous variety of habitats, okay. Besides inhabiting our familiar temperate and aerobic environment. So inhabited our familiar temperate and anaerobic environment. So these prokaryotes are grown inhabited with the familiar of temperate and aerobic environments. Certain type of bacteria may thrive in or even require conditions that are hostile to eukaryotes, such as unusual chemical environments, high temperatures as high as 130 degrees, and lack of oxygen. So the prokaryotes are a certain type of bacteria which are thriving or even requiring conditions to hostile to the eukaryotes, okay, such as usual chemical environments. So they can unusual chemical environments at high temperatures and the lack of oxygen, these prokaryotes can grow, okay. Moreover, the rapid reproductive rate of prokaryotes optimally less than 20 minutes per cell division for many species. So optimally less than 20 minutes per cell division for many species permits them to take advantage of transiently favorable conditions, and conversely the ability of many bacteria to form resistant spores allows them to survive adverse conditions, okay. So the cell is showing advantages in transiently favorable conditions, and it is also conversely ability of many bacteria to form resist spores allows them to survive adverse conditions, okay. So this is about the introduction part. In the next class we will be continuing with the prokaryotes have relatively simple anomalinase, okay friends, thanks for watching. If you like my video, please kindly like, share and subscribe it with your friends also. Thank you so much.